This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
All right, we have a Stanley Cup winner, and yes, it stays in the state of Florida, probably much to the chagrin of Tampa Bay Lightning fans, but nonetheless, the Florida Panthers took care of some business against the Edmonton Oilers. It was a very exciting series. We're going to talk about what the Panthers accomplished. You know, a lot of people, as I bring in my partner, Dave Mishkin, the radio voice of the Lightning, of course, and if you want to get involved in the conversation at Bolts Radio, you certainly can. You know, partner, inevitably, you see this with any team or person who wins a championship. Oftentimes, comparisons start to make their way into the conversation. Whether that's right or wrong, I think it's fun to have conversations. Who's the best of this era? Top 5 teams since the Cap era, and you know the Athletic had something like that. When you start talking about these teams, particularly ones who have won back to back, where do they rank? I think it's fun conversation. I don't think there's nothing wrong with it. It's opinion-based with some facts sprinkled in there because, I mean, do you really know? Are you going to compare the Chicago Blackhawks when they had their run against the Florida Panthers now, or even the Tampa Bay Lightning? It's fun to compare teams and players, but everybody is different when they compete and dealing with adversity differently. But the Panthers certainly have put themselves into that conversation with how they played and how impressive they really were throughout the whole playoffs. I mean, they got to a standard that was pretty remarkable. And did they have some tough games here and there? Sure, but I thought overall, collectively, when you take a look at their body of work and how they wanted their game to be played in the playoffs, I feel like they got to that, and they stayed there for a pretty long period of time, which I think is hard to do. And, you know, because some series you may have where maybe you don't play your best, but your goaltender just steals it for you. You know, it wasn't clicking for you. Maybe the matchup was tougher in round 3 than in round 1. And again, I think there were certain games you could have pointed to where maybe that happened, but I thought big picture, and we can get into the series, the last game if you want, I thought big picture, the Panthers got to their game quicker and for an extended period of time during these playoffs that really I thought was perhaps the most impressive thing I took from watching them throughout this time.
They were virtually a completely different team once the playoffs began as opposed to what they showed during the regular season. And I mean that in a complimentary way. They were a good team, but they weren't really a team that distinguished itself during the regular season. The stats bear that out. They played well enough to get in the playoffs. And you remember we had a conversation with George Richards before the playoffs began. I think at that point it was looking like the Lightning were going to see the Panthers in the first round, but it wasn't locked in yet.
Right.
And he relayed what the Panthers were thinking and feeling, and he was spot on, which was they've basically been waiting for the playoffs to start, and they don't care if they have home ice. They don't care if they have to start on the road. Like, tell us where to show up. We're going to be ready to go. And doesn't matter if we're at home. Doesn't matter if we're on the road. Doesn't matter who we're playing. It's going to be on. And it was. We have talked a lot about the Panthers over the last 2 months because the Lightning played the Panthers, and then, you know, we've done a weekly show and we have covered the playoffs, and the Panthers have been one of the teams that have played and survived. So they went 16-7, which, you know, if you're going to win the Stanley Cup, you're going to have an impressive record.
Right.
The 7 losses, 3 came in the Toronto series, and I think that 2 of those 3 games, like you mentioned, did they have any slip-ups? Maybe the beginning of the Toronto series where they lost a couple of games. I don't think that they played badly when they lost Game 6. It was a tight game. It was 0-0. They just happened to give up the goal, right, that gave Toronto the lead. You look at the other games that they lost. See, I'm not sure that they were defending as well at the beginning of the Stanley Cup final, but they're such a good team that they were able to do other things to be in those games or win them, basically. Like they won game 2. I'm not sure that they were really at their defensive standard in that game, but they won in overtime, so they got their split, right? It was really the last 2 games of the Stanley Cup Final that, to me, they kind of reverted to the team that we had seen through much of the first 3 rounds. And when we last spoke, it was leading into Game 6. And what I said at the time was one of 2 things needs to happen for Edmonton. Either they need to make Florida a little bit more uncomfortable defensively and kind of force them into making some mistakes, which I was less certain they would be able to do that. Or they were going to have to be really, really great defensively and be at the level that the Panthers were at in Game 5. And actually, at the beginning of Game 6, like, the Oilers had a couple of looks. Like, Bobrovsky made some pretty good saves early in Game 6. But the Panthers never really made the sorts of mistakes that Edmonton made. And I thought Edmonton came out and tried to dictate things in the first period, and therefore kind of they had more possession, and you could see they were applying more pressure than what was coming at them. But the mistakes that they made, Greg, in the first period, leading to 2 Florida goals, were significant defensive mistakes that the Panthers simply weren't making in the last 2 games of the series and for much of the playoffs.
Sure.
So how did the Panthers do it? They played at an extraordinarily high level defensively, and they were like merciless. When the other team made a mistake, they cashed in.
They did.
So if you made a medium to significant mistake, there was a good chance it was ending up in your net. And that happened at the beginning of Game 6. I mean, the 2D, and it's their 2 best D, Ekholm and Bouchard. And look, Ekholm missed a lot of time. I love Ekholm. Ekholm has been a great player for Edmonton. When they got him at the deadline, that was a huge, not this year, but previously.
Sure.
Like he really has helped their blue line. Did it affect him that he missed significant amount of time and you're dropping him into basically late playoff games? Maybe. But like, what can you not do against this Florida forecheck? You cannot just diddle around with the puck in your own end. The Oilers, like, they had a little bit of not a great sequence in their own zone, but they get through it and they get the puck. And if I'm remembering right, I think the Panthers are going for a change. But Verhaeghe stays out, or maybe Verhaeghe came off the bench. So Verhaeghe is in the neutral zone. And Bouchard and Ekholm are just like, they're not moving the puck out of their own end. And Verhaeghe's like, okay, I'm going to come at you. And what Verhaeghe did was he didn't come right at Ekholm, but he went into the middle to try and disrupt what he was expecting was going to be a D-to-D pass. So the hesitation, and again, we're talking about like, this is hard to do, right? But we're talking about the Stanley Cup Final. We're talking about a team that has been surgical in forcing you into mistakes. You have to move the puck cleanly and efficiently and quickly out of your own end. We said it when the Lightning played the Panthers. We've said it throughout the playoffs. So Ekholm and Bouchard, I'm including Bouchard, but it was really Ekholm. He's holding onto the puck. Verhaeghe's like, all right, I'm going. And so what does Ekholm have to do? He's worried about Verhaeghe's stick. Yeah. So he has to airmail the D-to-D pass. Now it's a wild pass. Bounces off the boards. Bouchard's trying to like trap it down. And he kind of muffed it. And who's on him? Vroom! Reinhart on him. Boom. Puck stolen. Gone. Right to the net. Ekholm tried to erase him and made another mistake. Like he missed the puck and the body. And Reinhart gets an in-alone chance. So as well as Edmonton did to kind of make some plays in the first period when it was 1-0, and then even before, like when it was 0-0, when it was 1-0, they didn't get looks like Reinhart got. Like in alone on the goalie. How did that happen? Started with just not great defensive play. Get that puck out. Fight the battle in the neutral zone. Better yet, like get to the red line and get it in deep. and forced the Panthers to go 200 feet, which they can do too. But that was a significant mistake that led to a prime chance, and now they're down. And one other theme that we saw, particularly in the latter part of the series, was the Oilers were unable to get the lead. How did they beat Dallas? We talked about this in the Western Conference Final. One reason why the Oilers were able to beat Dallas, they got the lead. Dallas had to play catch up throughout that series against Edmonton that was D'ing up really well. Well, the shoe was on the other foot for much of the Stanley Cup Final in that the Panthers got the lead. That first goal from Reinhart was a big, big goal. Now, Oilers have to play catch up, and they never got back to a tie game situation. They apply some more pressure. Bobrovsky's good. He's making saves. And again, this happened a lot to Edmonton, a goal in the final minute of a period. I mean, I remember at least 2 or 3 instances when this happened, and this was a huge goal scored by Tkachuk. And it's a 2-on-3. A 2-on-3. And the Oilers back in, I think it was Luostarinen, had time to skate to the circle. The middle of the ice is covered by McDavid. And McDavid goes to Luostarinen, opening up the middle of the ice. Tkachuk slides right in there, gets the puck, goes to, it's not like inner slot, or it is the inner slot. It's a little bit farther out. It's above the hash marks, but he's in the middle of the ice. He's in a great spot, and there's traffic in front. I'm not sure that the Oilers got those sorts of looks. He shoots it in. That was a completely avoidable goal if you're Edmonton. Now it's 2-0. It's like those, remember we see sometimes it's like likelihood of victory, like in a game where it's like, well, if you're up by 15 points in a basketball game and there's 2 minutes left, it's 99.9% certain you're going to win, right? You fall behind 2-0 to the Panthers, even though the Oilers did rally in the 2 wins they got. That is just way too difficult. And I think Draisaitl even said it heading into Game 6. It's they haven't seen our best yet, and we need to get the lead. Well, they still didn't see their best. And why didn't the Panthers see the Oilers' best? Panthers got a vote there. They did not let Edmonton get to the level that the Oilers were at earlier in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So look, the Panthers, they were the best team. They were the best team in the playoffs. And I'm not saying whoa, we had this back in April, but you can remember us talking after the Lightning lost that series. I'm like, the Panthers are going to be a beast to beat.
You called that right at the beginning of the plaaffs.
The Maple Leafs had a chance, but some of that was the Panthers' play dipped. It dipped early in that series, and that was probably their one hiccup. And they needed to get that win in overtime in Game 3.
Did it change your perspective?
Saved them.
Do you think it changes? It's tough to tell because this is a results-driven league. They always are. Does it change a little bit reflecting back maybe Toronto's game a little bit?
I'm seeing a lot. I'm seeing a lot of this
but
the Leafs, they took the Panthers to 7 games.
But that only goes so
games.
far. But in fairness to them, we just talked about Florida's level of play. Toronto, to their credit, it just happened to be in the first, or in the second round. It was a struggle to get beyond that narrative for them because it's either Stanley Cup or bust. But I do think when you look at Toronto, are you able to take a step back a little bit? I'm curious.
Well, I think the people who are looking at this as pie in the sky for Toronto are, and on our show we said when you assess the Lightning, how much of this do you have to give just credit to the other team? And that's kind of what Toronto is saying. How much is this just...
That's fair.
They were a phenomenal team, a tough opponent, and we actually got 3 games from them.
Yeah.
Now, look, I'm not discounting that.
Sure.
What I am saying is the Panthers were not the Panthers early in that series against Toronto. Now, maybe Toronto deserves credit for that.
Maybe Toronto had a say in that, right?
Maybe Toronto had a say in that, but the other teams didn't, right? No. And later in the series, Toronto didn't.
Right.
Once the Panthers got to their game in that series, and I would say it was the middle of Game 3 on.
It was done.
It wasn't done because Toronto did get a win in Game 6, but it required extraordinary play from the Maple Leafs. I think in their wins in the first 2 games, they didn't need to play at an extraordinarily high level.
Yeah.
Which the Panthers had a hiccup. I will maintain this, and this may be an unpopular opinion league-wide. I think in this show it'll probably reach some welcome ears and eyeballs if they're watching us. I'm not sure a team in the playoffs defended as well against the Panthers as the Lightning did, not in games 1 and 5.
Yeah.
But look at how the Lightning defended in games 2, 3, and 4 and what they gave up, which is to say not much, to the Panthers. They got a pretty good performance from Vasilevsky in game 3, which was the one game they won. But show me a team, Toronto, Carolina, and Edmonton, that really, like, the Lightning did limit chances in the middle part of the series for an extended period of time. They had a do you want to call it a collapse? They had their problems at the end of game 4, which really cost them. But for the first 56 minutes of that game, they were outstanding. I thought they were very good defensively in game 2, which was a 1-0 game plus an empty netter. So again, this is like, it doesn't really mean anything. That's what, like, you're like, well, does this change the way Toronto views it? I mean, internally for the Maple Leafs, they have to make these same calls just like Julian is doing for the Lightning. What I am saying is that to credit the Lightning in that weird way is really more just of a compliment to the Panthers. Sure. And they were almost unbeatable in this playoff year.
That's fair.
And I think that they were actually more impressive this year than they were last year.
I actually, that's the bigger point, because how many times that second year that you're trying to go back to back, you know, you may be worn down. Things are just, it's just different. It feels
I don't think
harder.
I don't think the Lightning dipped though in 2021. I thought they had a really, really strong playoff in 2021.
I think you can have a strong playoff. I just
you liked them. You thought that they were more of a Kool-Aid man bursting through the wall in 2020.
I thought so too, and I felt that way with Pittsburgh in their first.
Pittsburgh sure.
Pittsburgh was just like,
yeah, that was a lot more pronounced.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like the second one.
The second cup was a little bit by hook or by crook.
Bobbing and weaving. I'm just saying, with all the, you know, we talked about with the Lightning and all the games they've accumulated over the years, and that, you know, how much does that impact you when you have another deep playoff run coming off of a long Stanley Cup run that they had? I do think that narrative sticks a little bit, and again, it's a credit to Florida to get to the level they got to for that extended period of time. And Dave, even some of the players that they lost from the first Cup run to this one, and how they were able to overcome that,
didn't seem to affect them.
Brad Marchand,
Jones really helped with the Montour absence,
and Marchand really helped.
That was a phenomenal pickup. Yeah,
I mean, come on. It was pretty incredible. So you're going to have these things come in, some of these comparisons, and you know, it's fun to have the conversation. I'm curious what our audience thinks about it, if anything at all. At Bullets Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation, we're going to be seeing and hearing about some trades that are coming in. Steve just texted us, partner, about Zegras potentially going to Philadelphia.
That was from Elliot Friedman.
Yeah, Elliot Friedman. Yeah, not Steve Versnick.
Behind that.
Yeah. Although, you know, look, if Steve would have said that, I would have given credit to Steve. And
that's a weird relationship between the Flyers and Ducks, because they had the whole Cutter Gauthier thing, right? And Jamie Drysdale. Yeah. Look, the GMs obviously like working with one another.
Yeah.
Pat Verbeek and Keith Jones.
How about that?
Yeah.
Also, Steve texted us yesterday. Dave Pinota from the fourth period had something where he mentioned that the Lightning looking at up front in more like Perbix hitting the open market July 1st as UFA.
And probably our fans are less interested in hearing us recap the Stanley Cup final.
Right.
Unless they have some questions.
They got to get into it.
The Panthers they've fully enjoyed to the victor go the spoils. They've fully enjoyed the spoils from some of the clips that I have seen since they won the Cup. So I think they've helped kind of give a turbo boost to the South Florida nightclub economy in the time since they won the Cup. Partner? And not just them, like where they are, there are crowds around them, and you know.
It's okay, right?
So they're definitely helping the local economy.
We're all for it, right?
And kind of solidifying, like they seem to be embracing their
apparently the Stanley Cup got shipped
as
again.
Kind of like we're the villains and we like
Right.
it, right?
They played it well. I mean, look, they
Yeah.
definitely have some guys you want to root against, and that's what makes sports fun.
right.
I mean,
And their fans seem to like the fact
Yeah,
that their
why not?
players are embracing that. Now, before we get to the Lightning,
Yeah.
there are two players on the Panthers that I want to mention. Bennett, who won the Conn Smythe and is due a new contract. He's a UFA, or he will be a UFA in 8 days, 9 days. So it is unclear if the Panthers are going to be able to re-sign him. I'm just stating it in broad strokes here. And I think Bennett would like to stay. If he stays, he's going to take less and maybe a lot less than what he would get going to another team. So he has to weigh that. That is a guy I think the Panthers want to try and find a way to make it work. It sounds like Ekblad is going to be moving on. So for those Lightning fans who are like, Ekblad, had they hit on Hagel? We'll just wait until the preseason next year. And he's probably, it sounds like, going to be on a different team.
Surprised by that, or do
year.
you feel like the Jones covers
I just
them
think
in
it's
that way?
that and they don't have the money.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're going
Can't
to
keep
find a
everybody.
way to re-sign Bennett, they're going to be really tight. I haven't looked at their numbers, but I mean, Bennett is going to command a huge dollar amount. Now, maybe they're like, we know we can't keep Bennett. We want to use that money to bring back Ekblad. That's
Yeah.
a choice they're making. But it sounded like, from what I read, it was like Ekblad, when he addressed the crowd, made it. It was almost like I had a great time as a Panther. Thank you for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
Yeah, right.
the tone of
Maybe he
the
kinda
tone
knew.
of his speech. Yeah. We'll see. For the Lightning, so yes, the 3 UFAs that we mentioned last week, Perbix, Glendening, and Atkinson. At this point, I mean, it does look, and we had the report from the fourth period that Perbix is going to hit the open market. I mean, they re-signed Crozier, so that makes sense. Had they brought back Perbix, he was making over $1 million last year. He was and will be getting a raise. That was going to eat into what the Lightning have left in terms of available cap space. So I can't say I'm shocked by that decision and the fact that Crozier is a righty and Perbix is a righty. So the Lightning are kind of slotting Crozier in, and Crozier is ready. Crozier is ready to be in the NHL. I was going to have to go out in training camp and preseason and earn the spot.
Yeah, right.
Because I think in his extension, the first year is still a two-way contract.
Right.
But that kind of makes sense.
Sure.
You know, I think working against Glendening and Atkinson too, age, honestly, and that's probably as much as any reason why, you know, the Lightning maybe can find comparable players who are a little bit younger, have younger legs. Although with Glendening moving on, the Lightning, I think, are going to need to address the faceoff circle. And if they can find a righty who's really good at winning faceoffs, that would be a bonus. And then the other guys, the guy we mentioned last week, Gage Gonsalves. Mm-hmm. So the Lightning don't need to sign Gage Gonsalves by July 1. He is a restricted free agent with arbitration rights. So again, this is different than last year when kind of the clock was ticking on the Stamkos deal, much like we just said about Bennett. Like, if the Panthers are going to re-sign Bennett, it would seem likely that it's going to happen before July 1. And Bennett actually has the opportunity the week leading up to July 1 to kind of talk to some teams and dip his toe in the pool, even though the only team that can actually sign him before July 1 is Florida. This is different. All the Lightning need to do is qualify Gage Gonsalves, and by issuing a qualifying offer, which is a 10% raise, they basically locked him in. Now, there are a couple things that can happen. A team can swoop in with an offer sheet, and that's what happened to Edmonton last year with Broberg and Dylan Holloway. The Blues took both of those players away from Edmonton by offer sheeting them. You can do that with a restricted free agent. That's pretty rare.
Did we
to
see that with
see
Montreal and
happen.
Carolina?
Yeah,
Was
so
that Kotkaniemi?
that happened with Kotkaniemi,
Yeah.
and then I think the Canadians offer sheeted Aho, but Carolina matched it.
right.
So the team that holds the rights can match the offer,
Yeah.
and then they keep the player. But usually the team that is offer sheeting the player is trying to put the other team in an uncomfortable position,
Correct.
whether dollars-wise or term-wise. So in the case of Broberg and Holloway, I mean, they are younger players. But I mean, they'd gone through like a deep playoff run with Edmonton. Gonçalves, I guess. So for Lightning fans who are like, why have we heard nothing about Gage Gonçalves? We are going to find out at the end of the month if they qualified him. I believe that they are going to qualify him, and we just haven't heard about it, if it's happened or it's going to be happening. It's not much to do it, and by doing it, you're maintaining your rights on that player. A player who is a restricted free agent with arbitration rights, that means that if they cannot reach an agreement after July 1, not before July 1, after July 1, then it can go to an arbitrator. And the arbitrator is going to listen to both sides and say, this is the number. Both sides would have to agree to the number. The player has to agree. But if the team decides that it doesn't like the number, they can walk away, and then the player becomes a UFA. By not qualifying the player also becomes a UFA. That's why I don't think it really makes sense to not qualify Gonçalves. But as I said last week, I'm not the general manager. So I think these answers are going to be provided in the next week. And if for fans who are like, why have we not heard about a contract? Well, the contract it's the qualifying. Once the qualifying occurs, the contract can come later. If you recall, Ross Colton, I think his year as a restricted free agent with arbitration rights, they got really close. And then most times, even if it kind of is right on the cusp of going to an arbitrator, they reach an agreement. So it's rare to see the arbitrator get involved. It's just a little bit more, power, honestly, for the player. Not as much as when they're a UFA, but they have a little bit more. And that they have a little bit more juice on their side when they're negotiating. So those are the four guys. And then the question is, where are the Lightning going to look to add? Because they're going to have to fill some roster spots, and they still have, the $3.4 million available in cap space.
That was the question
with
Zach
Connor
had.
Sherry on the NHL roster.
For sure. Zach on Facebook Partner said, when do you expect JBB to re-sign Gonçalves? And you kind of got into that. So
yeah, so
that feels like the biggest question
happen,
for Lightning fans.
as long as he's qualified, it can happen in July. It doesn't need to happen before July 1.
It's an important point and something to keep in mind as we kind of navigate the waters here. Karen on X says, wouldn't miss an episode of Lightning Power Lunch listening from the beach in Cancun.
Wow.
Are you kidding me,
Thanks, Karen.
Wow.
I hope you put on some sunscreen.
Any Lightning fans?
If you live in Florida, it's interesting that you would go to a beach. I mean, I understand Cancun's a vacation destination, but so is Tampa, right? For a lot of people.
It's like one of those things you just want to get away.
Yeah.
You just break away and you go from there. But that is the beauty.
Enjoy your I assume it's a vacation, Karen.
Yes.
Enjoy
And if it's not and you're still listening to us, we appreciate that.
I've been taken hostage on a beach in Cancun. They gave me one request. I said, please give me my phone so I can listen to Power Lunch.
Listen, we'll put in that word for you. If you need any help, let us know. We have thousands of people listening, and we appreciate that. But thank you, Karen. We always appreciate the support, and keep telling your friends to listen. And again, we'll probably do one more, I think, show.
Yeah, I think we're slated to do a July 1 show, actually.
Yeah, so
we'll have more clarity on some of these other questions that we'll
do that as well. Real quick on Bennett before we get to Nick on YouTube who had a question. I feel like it's going to happen, or it's going to go both ways. I think if he stays with the Panthers, I believe, in my opinion, you may have to take less to do that. But knowing that you have a chance to do something pretty special, and really his legacy, in my opinion, has been cemented within that franchise. But the other part of that is, okay, so other teams are looking at this, and they're saying, man, Sam Bennett is the missing piece. Mm-hmm. He changes the way we play in the playoffs. I mean, Dave, there's not a guy who scored bigger goals, who was a force physically. And let's face it, I think there's a leadership component to that. And when you have 2 cups and then you have the credibility and the hardware individually coming off the playoffs in the year that he had, I think a lot of people would look at that and say, Sam Bennett, I would overpay to bring him in. Is he a missing
And with the
piece?
cap going up,
Right,
there's some teams that have so much room.
And even teams
that they could basically almost give him the league max.
And so that's
if
where
they wanted to.
That's where this comes in. Because I think if you're Sam Bennett, here's not the elephant in the room. because I think he's evolved as a player since when he first started as a high draft pick in Calgary to where he is right now in Florida. But why was he able to prosper in Florida? Was he supposed to be the guy driving all the offense, or was he part of the offense? And I think sometimes when you come into a league and what was he, a top 5 pick, right? Was he 3rd overall?
Oh, yeah. 3rd or 4th, yeah.
But, like, there's expectations with that. And it's not just scoring 15 goals a year. If you're 3rd overall, you're supposed to come in and 30, 35 goals, be that guy that's going to whatever. That didn't happen for obvious reasons. It didn't happen. That we see a lot of athletes do that. But is Sam Bennett better in an environment? Do you get the best out of Sam Bennett if he's part of that machine rather than he's the guy and we're going to follow that?
Well, if he leaves the Panthers, he's probably going to be taking into consideration not just the contract, but the team and where he is going. So, look, Brandon Montour was a really, really important part of the Panthers prior to this year. He took more money. Good for him. I mean, he earned it. He got a really nice contract from Seattle. He goes to Seattle. They missed the playoffs. Yeah, slightly different example here, but Kevin Stenlund was a really critical part of the Panthers' championship run last year. They don't bring him back. He goes to Utah. They miss the playoffs.
Yep.
So, I mean, Bennett is more in the difference-making category of a Montour than a Stenlund, but Stenlund was a really important part of the championship team. And from Utah's perspective, they're probably like, we love it. Like, he had a great year in the circle, a good penalty killer. I'm talking about with Utah last year.
Sure.
And so, like, if you leave the championship environment, you know, you may bring some of that with you, but it's not enough in most instances to just completely have that envelop the room, right?
Sure.
And it matters who's playing with you and what the vibe is like. I mean, the Panthers have such great chemistry as a group right now. So that's why it's a hard decision.
It is. And I think there's part of the money aspect. I mean, this is a chance for him to really make, I mean, look, he's going to make a lot of money regardless, but really make a ton. Then you have the Florida dynamic with no state income tax. And I know Paul Bissonnette was complaining about that a while ago about, you know, using that as an advantage, a tool for teams in Florida, which I think it's just, that's what you do when you're trying to bring people in. That's part of the package. And then I think for him, it's also just being comfortable. You know, athletes are creatures of habit. They do like to get paid, but creatures of habit's a big deal. And if Florida's able to keep most of the players from that championship run, and Sam Bennett's a big part of that, he may look at it and say, you know, I got it made. My legacy is what it is here. It has never been better. I am respected. I have put myself in a position where when my career is done, they're going to hang my jersey in the rafters here in Florida. I mean, I could see something like that happening. I'm not sure that was the case when he came.
Oh, no.
What was the expectation, right? So that's what I mean. And so there may be a little bit of loyalty there. I think that's what the Panthers would be hoping for. Like, hey, man, we can't give you what you want, but you got a good thing here. And you're still going to make
millions. The Lightning
millions.
have seen that. I mean, not in every instance, but think of all the players the Lightning have re-signed who have taken under market value to stay with the Lightning.
For sure.
So we'll see.
Yeah. So I think
we'll find out in a week. I think if it gets to July, I would be surprised if Bennett re-signs. And I think that you lose. So if you re-sign with the team that holds your rights, you can get the 8th year.
Yeah, I think
but if you sign with a different team, you can only get to 7. But I think once the calendar turns to July, even if he were to re-sign with the Panthers, he can only get to 7. So if he's going to re-sign with the Panthers, he will probably be doing it for the 8 years prior to July 1. By the time we talk on July 1 in 8 days or whatever,
right?
If Bennett is still on the open market, it probably means that he's moving on.
Yep.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep, you are correct.
Yeah.
Bennett can only get 8
if it's prior to July 1.
I mean, and how old is
with
he,
the
though,
team
right?
that you were with, which is the only team you can sign with.
How old is Bennett now at this point?
2014 draft, he would have been a 96 birthday. Is that right?
So is he?
So I mean, he's in his late 20s.
Yeah,
I don't know when his birthday
30
is.
Yeah, maybe.
It depends. It depends if he was overage or not.
They're all younger than me, partner. It doesn't matter. Nick on YouTube. This is an interesting question. Unless the playoff format changes, it feels like we will have to beat the Panthers to win. Do you think we should make offseason moves with this goal at the top of mind?
Well, Julian Brisebois said no to that question.
Yeah.
He said, if we try and build a team specifically to take on the Panthers, what if we don't play the Panthers, which is certainly possible. So I agree with Julian. And we had the comment, I think it was last week, about, you want to have a team that can beat a variety of different opponents. And teams can be built like the Panthers, including maybe the Panthers next year.
Yeah.
And not play at the level the Panthers were at in this playoff year. So that is what I am saying to the fans, is to tap the brakes and just understand what the benefit of the big picture. The big picture, and this is, I think, an accurate view of the big picture. The big picture is how things look today. They're not going to be the same at the beginning of the playoffs next year. They are not. The Panthers, I think, played actually better in this year's playoff than last year. So what does that mean for playoffs 2026? You can't get your brain set on, we have to build a Lightning team or a Maple Leaf team or whatever team to beat the 2025 Panthers. The 2025 Panthers are done. That team has completed its goal. Next year is a new year, and that Panther team will look different, and that Panther team will have different things happening, right? Like they are going to say, we want the three-peat. We know they're going to say that. There's a reason why it is so hard to three-peat. The Lightning got to Game 6 against Colorado, and the Panthers have been to 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals. But to say you want to do it and to actually do it are two different things. So they definitely hit their stride. They also stayed really remarkably injury-free through much of the playoffs. I mean, yeah, there were a couple of guys that got banged up. Rodriguez missed a couple of games. Reinhart did miss a couple of games. I'm not discounting that. But you look at the main guys on Florida, and even Reinhart, who was a main guy, he only missed a couple of games. It's not like they had to play a whole series without him, right?
Right.
So Rodriguez missed a couple of games. Other teams had way more significant injuries. The Lightning had to play their whole series without Oliver Bjorkstrand, right? So what's going to happen? Do we know that the Panthers are going to be able to kind of follow the yellow brick road, next year as well, where it's like, okay, the yellow brick road did have some pitfalls on it. If I remember
Sure.
The Wizard of Oz, falling asleep in a field, but you know what I mean? That
I do.
The Panthers had everything fall into place. They earned what they got, but they also got some breaks. Who's to say that that's going to happen next year? So I think Julian's approach is the right approach, which is we're not worried about the Panthers. We're worried about our group. Now, maybe we can learn some things from the last 2 years playing the Panthers, particularly, I think they did learn some things 2 years ago, but it wasn't just playing the Panthers, it was the team. If you heard Julian's session at the end of the season with Braden Coburn and Greg Wolf on the last call, they kind of asked him about it, and he said, I liked our team coming out of the 2024 playoffs, but I felt we needed to make some changes. It's I like our team even more this year. So he's I'm not really looking to make any major changes. That's kind of what he said. So are there things that he can look at from the 2025 series loss to the Panthers and say, yeah, maybe on the edges we can add a player like this or add a player like that? But as we've said over the last couple of months, I think Julian, he likes his team. And he never sleeps on this challenge of how can we make our team better? And I think that is going to be part of the goal. To that end, we're seeing some guys who are in their mid to late 30s are not coming back. They feel that they can slot in Crozier. for Perbix unless they add another right-handed defenseman in free agency, which could happen. I mean, I don't know. But, I mean, we're seeing some movement. But I think that it's less about worrying about the Panthers and more about let's just try and build the team that we want to build and force our opponent to deal with us.
For sure.
That's kind of his mindset. And I think if you're a Lightning fan, I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to feel, but I mean, I kind of like the sound of that.
I think that's being responsible. I think that's probably what leadership looks like when your team, because when your team has the series the Lightning had, but maybe the season overall, and you did improve metrically in some key areas that you wanted to improve upon, which was mainly defensively. And then you factor in who you lost to, how did you play, how did the other team play. I think with all the data that these teams collect now, one of the jobs as the general manager is to look through that information and look at it as objectively as possible. It's hard to do, but sometimes you have to take that emotion out of it and look at it and process it and say, okay, where did we really fall short? And where did we like our game? And, sometimes this just happens. You're not going to win every year. And I think what Julian has that some GMs don't is the occurrence of winning the cup recently. He has that fresh in his mind a little bit in terms of, I know what a championship team looks like. I know when we need to address some things. But I like our team. And I'm not going to do anything drastically. Now, look, if there's a trade that makes sense and he's willing to pull the trigger, partner, one thing we have seen Julien Brisebois do, he will do that. He understands that I just can't be pigeonholed and be stubborn and say I'm not going to do anything because I like our team. Of course, if somebody is available and we can make it happen, we're going to do it. But I think what should make Lightning fans feel pretty good is that, one, Julian has won before, so he knows what it looks like. Two, he felt pretty confident in this team, just happened to run into a buzzsaw. And three, not to overreact. Because I think when you're a GM and you overreact, you get to a point as an organization, you're making bad decision after bad decision, and you're never really gaining some traction. And I also think, too, for Lightning fans, just taking a step back, you want to be competing for a cup every year. You're not going to win the cup every year. And I think sometimes having that in the back of your mind, understanding that this happens. It's not normal to win back-to-back. It's not normal to go to 3 straight cups. At some point, you are going to take a step back and not win a cup. And it's okay, big picture, because it's just really hard to do. And I think if you're able to process those things as a fan, I think you'll be able to understand and appreciate the process a little bit more than just being very emotional and saying, we lost again in the first round, damn it. Dave, we need to blow it up. That's not the approach that is going to lead this organization to be successful. They still have a good core. They've got some younger players coming up. I mean, look, it may seem like a small thing, but the Lightning's back end may be better with a full year of Crozier in the lineup. That's assuming he makes the team, and that's assuming that he plays. But if from what we've seen from Crozier since he's been a member of the Lightning organization gives us any indication of what his play is going to look like next year, you're going to find a guy, Dave, that wasn't overwhelmed by the big moments and fared pretty well when he had an opportunity to play. That might be an upgrade.
Yeah.
Overall, in your top 6, if you get a guy like Crozier coming in. Now, you mentioned faceoffs. I'm sure Julian's going to look at that and say, how can we address it? And I do think I wouldn't be surprised if they make a trade in the offseason for a player with term who's young enough that might be able to help them partner in an area where potentially they need some help. I think the good thing is, too, they actually have some younger players now. Not a ton, but I think enough that can not only make them younger, but there's a little bit of upside, maybe a lot of upside with those players that could elevate the Lightning in terms of where they are in the Eastern Conference even more. And I think as a Lightning fan, take the Isaac Howard situation and, put that aside. They have some guys.
Speaking of someone you could trade. Right.
Somebody who could trade. That's right. They have
They
some
could get
guys.
some value for that.
Yeah, they've got some guys in their system that we saw this year that I think aren't too far away from really contributing. And I think the Lightning are in an overall good spot. And I think most organizations would trade places with Tampa Bay.
If I'm remembering the question, it was really about the playoff format because the Lightning have seen the Panthers 2 years in a row in the
It was the
first round.
playoff format, yes.
And everything you said is absolutely true, and I'm not going to back off what I said.
Sure.
But yeah, there's the possibility because they play in the same division. They're going to see the Panthers if they can get in the playoffs next year, which is always the goal going into training camp and the preseason and the regular season. The goal of the regular season is to get in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So if they can do that and they happen to see the Panthers again in the first round, what I am saying is we don't know if what they saw from the Panthers this year is going to be what whoever the Panthers would see next year. And if it's the Lightning in the first round, so be it. So I don't think that you can really worry about that. I mean, is it possible the Panthers will be even better next year? Of course, anything is possible. They have a great team with a great coach and a terrific general manager, and they are a formidable foe that happens to be in the Lightning's division. But does that mean that they are unbeatable year after year after year after year? I don't think so. You can't obsess about that.
Yeah.
I mean, to Julian's point, let's say that the Lightning revamp their team somehow, which is very hard to do in the cap era anyway, and they find a way to beat the Panthers, and then they're ill-equipped because they made some systemic changes to their team to see who they would play in the next round.
Yep.
So I don't think that's really the management style here that Julian espouses. So
What I see, I feel like The Athletic, and again, these are outlets that they have to fill some content, partner, in the off season.
no,
And,
really?
You know, they come up with some topics that, you know, you're like, oh, okay, that's a little bit of a stretch. But I feel like one of them was each NHL's team's best and worst draft pick of the past decade. Did you happen to see this? I don't want to repeat myself, but for our audience out there, it was curious, and I'm going to scroll to the Lightnings because I felt like their worst might have been a little bit excessive. Let me get to it as my son is there saying, "Hey, Dad, how you doing? Am I going to be on the air yet?" So their the best player they picked out of this was Anthony Cirelli.
Okay.
You know, the last decade. So they, that makes a lot of sense. Worse, they had anyone in the last 4 drafts. And this is from Shayna Goldman, who was the one that put this together. She said
we should get her on next year.
She said contending.
She knows her stuff.
She does. Contending comes at a cost, which is depleted the Lightning's draft pool. Tampa Bay has not only had 1 first round in the past 5 years, which stresses the need for gems later in the draft, but management hasn't found many in recent years.
But I don't think she's including Geeky in that, is she?
So probably
The Lightning didn't draft Geeky.
So
They
it's hard to
acquired Geeky.
pinpoint, right? It's hard to pinpoint the worst when the last 4 or 5 years have overall been disappointments.
Well, I mean, look, the Lightning have not had first-round picks. So that has affected them. They don't have a first-round pick coming up
And
next week.
She mentioned that, yeah.
Yeah. But and I think if we were even to ask her, like what they've used those picks in trades to get in return has brought value. That's a very specific kind of lens. But Brandon Hagel has turned into one of the best players in the NHL. The Lightning used first-round picks to get him at the beginning of his career.
And right? I feel like you probably need to have that written somewhere because there's people who don't follow the Lightning that might not understand that.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that would be important to reiterate. But again, we talk about, some of these outlets and filling content and whether it's a national perspective, local perspective, I think this is where some of the conversation needs to be raised a little bit when you see these things. Put it in context because I think you're not getting the full picture when it comes to the Lightning because I think you're right. When you look at some of the players they've acquired over the years, they've used trades to bring in young players. I mean, we've talked about the Chernaks and even the Sergachevs when they were here. I mean, you used young prospects or draft picks to bring those players in, and it worked out really well. And so one thing the Lightning have done extremely well, and I think they'll probably continue to do it depending on the draft capital that they have or some players they're willing to let go, is that allowing other teams to develop the player and then you being able to pluck that player and he's basically NHL ready.
Yeah.
That helps cut down on it, because if I can't draft Connor Geekie because I didn't have the draft capital to get him when he was available to be drafted, maybe there's another way I can get him.
Right.
And that just, it's a longer process. You still need the assets, but it's doable.
Yeah.
And I think the Lightning have done that. Plus the players they've given up to get those players. I mean, Radish and Kachuk, I mean, they haven't been setting the world on fire.
Radish was scratched, I think, during some of Washington's playoff games.
I mean, Boris Kachuk was in the Penguins organization.
Yeah, Kachuk has turned into kind of a minor league guy.
So, I know there was a lot of people upset about that trade in terms of what they gave up to get Hagel, but then it was interesting.
No one's complaining about it.
Nobody is complaining about that. They actually talked about Buffalo as Hagel being the best pick during that decade.
Yeah.
Which was, I thought, pretty interesting.
They just didn't decide to keep him.
Yeah.
I don't understand Buffalo at all, because I'm seeing this news about Peterka to the Lightning maybe, but I mean...
You're seeing that a lot,
why?
Right?
So I actually checked Puckpedia.
Yeah.
The Buffalo Sabres have $23 million in cap space. So I don't really understand what the problem is with some of these guys.
Anybody do a significant raise?
Because it's not that they have a cap crunch. They just seem to be unwilling. If they're looking to trade JJ Peterka, who is coming out of his entry-level deal, he is a restricted free agent with no arbitration rights and basically made the league minimum. He had a great year last year. He's had 2 good years in a row.
Yeah.
But, if they want to keep him, they have the money to be able to keep him.
Is somebody due for a huge raise, though? I mean, what's...
Well, I don't know.
And
then Tuck's name again. And I said even last year, why are they thinking of trading Alex Tuck? He's a great player, and they got him on a pretty good deal.
And don't you need
also
somebody...
wants to be in upstate New York.
Don't you need somebody, too, right, when you're rebuilding? Don't you need veteran players who are pretty good?
Right. Now, Peterka is a younger guy.
Right.
And look, so, I mean, maybe this is clickbait, too. I don't know. I'm not close enough to that situation. I'm just telling you, I'm seeing some of these headlines. So for Lightning fans, and I saw one had reached out about what about Connor McDavid? I'm not quite sure how this started.
Yeah, right.
Well, I kind of know that McDavid in his season-ending press conference was asked about staying with the Oilers because he's entering his final year.
Didn't he say, I need to see what the plan is?
I mean, he said a lot of things. So, starting on July 1, the Oilers can renegotiate with him or re-sign him, extend him, I should say. And the question is, will McDavid do that? It's kind of like the Stamkos situation when we waited the whole year, right? So McDavid has 1 year left on his current contract. He makes, I think, 12 plus per year. So what he said was, as long as we have an opportunity to win here, I'm all in. I get it. Me, Dave Mishkin, I get it. I get why he says that. And then he added, having said that, kind of like ... And so what people glommed onto was that having said that, I'm like, yeah, that's what he's going to say. If he doesn't see management surrounding him and Leon Draisaitl, who did sign an extension, with, players that will help them win a Stanley Cup, then yeah, maybe he's going to reconsider. But it's not like he's I'm just going to run out the clock, So I think people immediately jump to conclusions, maybe the wrong conclusions, that he's not going to want to stay in Edmonton. So if Connor McDavid is not going to stay in Edmonton, it would behoove the Oilers to move him, right? Rather than lose him for nothing. And so I don't know where this McDavid to the Lightning talk started.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, a friend of mine actually texted me, was like, what's this I hear about Connor McDavid coming to the Lightning?
You should say it's a done deal. It's a done deal. He's here.
So somebody else wrote, What are your thoughts on McDavid to Tampa rumors? This is Nikki Cucci, which
Nikki, I have no thoughts. I have no thoughts to that.
Feasible or malarkey? So, again, this is how I will answer the question.
I mean, I guess anything
if you're a Lightning fan, you tell me how you're going to fit. I'll actually give you his exact contract because this is the contract that you.
What's he making? 11? 11?
It's over 12.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you the exact number. Connor McDavid makes $12.5 million.
What's Draisaitl making?
So Draisaitl
13?
Draisaitl just signed an extension. He's at 14.
14 million.
But he just signed his extension.
He just signed, correct.
So the next contract for McDavid is going to be more than 14. So
Yes.
here's the two-pronged question for Lightning fans who are like salivating over the prospect of this. And look, I get it. You plop Connor McDavid on the Lightning with Kucherov as his winger?
Yeah, but Kucherov's probably going back in the deal.
Well, okay.
That's the thing, you know?
Forgetting,
come on.
forgetting who you would need. Actually, you can't forget because this is the crux of the question.
Yeah.
Lightning fans who are like drooling over the prospect of this.
Yeah.
Explain to me how you were going to create $12.5 million for the Lightning. Now, they have 3.4, but they're going to need to use some of that money to fill out their roster, right? So you show me how you were going to create $12.5 million to add Connor McDavid onto the team they have now. And then if you're actually getting Connor McDavid, you are extending Connor McDavid. Now, I understand the cap's going up a little bit for 2026, 2027, but think about what he is going to command and how you are going to make that work. Because right now the Lightning have a lot of their guys locked up, but coming down the pike, Kucherov's coming down the pike, Vasilevsky's coming down the pike, where you're going to need to extend them too. So our friend Nikki Cucci was like feasible or malarkey. I don't know about malarkey, but it is going to take some extraordinary cap management, no pun intended there. Maybe that was a slip of some kind. Cap management to make the dollars work. And I will just say this last thing. The Lightning added Jake Gensel at free agency last year. That was a great signing, great pickup. And you know, he may have taken a little less to come to the Lightning based on what the open market would have yielded. The only way they were able to add Jake Gensel is by trading Mikhail Sergachev. Now, they got something for Sergachev. But when we're talking about the dollars, making the dollars work, they had to move money out to bring a contract in. This is on a whole other level. Mm-hmm. So somebody make the case to us how this could be done without completely dismantling, basically the Lightning's roster. So I'm not saying malarkey. I'm just saying, like, I don't see.
Could it happen? I think
how it can happen.
I think the better question is not to the Lightning. Do you think Connor McDavid? What are the better chances of that happening? Is he going to get traded in general? I mean, come on.
You've got Leon Draisaitl with you, either separate line, same line. You're playing on power play with him.
Yeah,
like you're going to be hard pressed to find.
It's a pretty good
situation
1-2 punch
like that.
Yeah.
And look, Bouchard is due a contract.
Right.
I think he's restricted with arbitration rights.
Yeah.
I think he's going to get a big raise. He's turned into one of the best offensive defensemen in the NHL.
He has.
They're going to have to re-sign him. Now, they have room. Edmonton actually has some room here, but I think they have a lot of free agents that they need to either get re-signed or replace.
Sure.
So they can't just give all of, like, most of their remaining money to Bouchard, understanding that McDavid, if they want to keep him, he's going to get a raise after this year as well.
No doubt.
So I don't know. I think McDavid has a pretty good thing going in Edmonton. And until they ran into the Panthers, I mean, when they beat Dallas, there were a lot of people in Edmonton who were like, this is it. This is the team, including Jack Michaels, who we had on before the series. He's like, I think Edmonton wins this thing. Mm-hmm. And he's probably more measured and neutral than a lot of Edmonton.
Certainly during the season it was, right? When we had him on.
Yeah, for sure.
Talking about where they
so
were.
I think, like, I wasn't impressed with Edmonton when we saw them in February, but I mean, that, as Jack said, they had the long layoff and, their team in the playoffs looked different because they had guys coming back from injury. I think they're a good team. They could win the Stanley Cup. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why Connor McDavid would say, the future here isn't really looking too good. I mean, I think the future looks pretty good.
We'll see what happens.
And also, Edmonton doesn't need to create the cap room.
Sure.
They already have him in the fold. So whatever his raise is, it's just whatever he's making now, the 12.5 plus whatever the additional money is, as opposed to adding the full contract to your roster.
Makes sense.
I think we had some other questions about, who the Lightning might add, but I mean, we can get to that.
We'll get into that next week. Probably be timely too.
The Lightning have 7 draft picks, but 4, maybe I shouldn't say but, because they found some gems in the 7th round before. But to Shayna Goldman's point, like a lot of their picks have come late in the draft. Yeah. So they have 3 picks before the 7th round and then 4 picks in the 7th round. Mm-hmm. And we will be live on Tuesday, July 1. Although when does the signing stuff start on July 1? Are we going to be like repeating
3 p.m.
deals announced?
We may get some deals.
3 p.m. Yeah. All right. There may be some rumblings. And if players decide to re-sign with their existing teams, Marner's another one.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, if Marner decides to re-sign in Toronto, that'll happen before July 1, so we can get into that.
Partner, great job as always, and we'll do it again
too.
Next week. Love it. All right, everybody, we appreciate you. Thanks to Steve Ersnick. I'm Greg Linnelli. We'll be with you again next Tuesday, noon to 1, for another edition of Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.